Ken, this is the 11th time that you've directed one of Paul's screenplays. And why do you believe it's such a fruitful collaboration? And I believe you allow him to be on set, for one thing.
When there's so many...
Where is he again? Is that annoying guy?
So many misconceptions there. I don't know where to begin, really.
It's best not to talk about it.
It's best
really.
not to talk about it.
Yeah.
I mean, we just get on, just annoy each other in a friendly way. So, no, it's okay. So we'll annoy each other again in the autumn, no doubt, with trying to scratch away at something. But I don't know what.
And how about you for a writer, Paul? Because you've written for other directors, of course, but how is it different with Ken?
Don't say.
It's too difficult. Yeah,
he tells such fibs. Don't believe a word he says.
I'll have to wait till he gets out the door there.
Yeah.
When it comes to Jimmy Grolton's story, when did you first hear about it, and why did you feel it was a story that you wanted to tell?
Well, I heard about it from an old friend I met in Nicaragua many years ago. A wonderful writer and actor called Donald O'Kelly. He's a bit of a Jimmy Grolton figure himself, to be honest. And so when he told us about the story and we dug into it, we found out that Jimmy, with 8 of his mates, had built this hall, and it was a free, safe place to meet in what was then a theological gulag, totally controlled by the Catholic Church and the elite. And it was probably it was always a little hall in a country bog in Leitrim. It was probably one of the truly free spaces in Ireland in the 1920s and 30s. And it was just, overflowing with ideas and richness. And we thought this would be just a remarkable way of leading us in to look at Ireland 10 years after the wind that shakes the barley.
And there's a great speech that Jimmy gives about 20s New York and how the bubble burst in 29 and greed. Mm-hmm. And it felt to me that it could have been given today, really, that speech about 2008 and the aftermath. Was that that parallel something that drew you both in?
Well, yes. I mean, the times were very... Obviously, there are differences, but because the economic system has moved on since then and is more sophisticated. But yes, there was the financial crash which we've had. There was the depression, which included mass unemployment, which we've had and which we've got. And the far right was on the march again, which was then, and we know where that led, and it's on the march again now. So those parallels are very important, and Jimmy made those comments, or not word for word, but I mean he was saying those kind of things alongside many others, and the point he was making was that the economic system will never reach equilibrium. It will go through. It is cyclical. And it can't provide a decent, dignified, sustained way of life for people with security. And I think that's the key thing Jimmy would have said. And it's the key thing we need to say now.
Because, some people have accused us of tagging that speech on, but it's actually true to Jimmy's point of view. And and like they say, the economy has changed in some senses. It's much more globalised just now. Corporations are much more sophisticated. Communications have changed, but the essence is still exactly the same. That profit is the most important thing. That growth is the most important thing, and it's not designing an economy around human need. And that's what Jimmy saw was important then, because there was vast quantities of the population, not only in Ireland but many other parts of Europe, which were without work. And here we are today, 80 years later, with 19 million unemployed, and the right using this tremendous anxiety to their own advantage to blame immigrants. So there are, it does. You can't make total parallel. These are things that are very important.
I mean, it's funny. Like in the 30s, we had 3 million unemployed, and there were no Romanians, Bulgarians, Poles, anyone, and we still have the mass unemployment.
No, I think you make the parallels there if the audience wants to make it, isn't it? Rather than, and you mentioned it was perhaps inspired by what he said or comes from what he actually said. How did you go about balancing sort of the known facts with taking some artistic license and fleshing out what was known?
Yes, well, we had to do that because there's certain public events that we know about Jimmy's life, the dates he came back, who his family members were. We went to the place, and you see that landscape, and the landscape is very, very important because they were in the poorer land. but implicitly that tells us about the plantation Catholics pushed off into the more marginal territories. And then when you see the land that's full of reeds, people had to go and work in Scotland to pick potatoes to survive. So there's a lot of implicit things that we saw by just going there and do the research. Talked to Donald O'Driscoll, a wonderful historian, who told us about the times and the different factions, and every moment is very, very complex between right and left, and things change, and all that constant movement. So we had to try and inform ourselves about all of that and be truthful to that. There are so many things about the private motivations, the little kind of glimpses of people's personalities, the relationships between them, and that could never be known. So we just have to be honest and upfront and say we're going to invent and imagine those as best we can.
The dancing is very important. Looks quite sort of rough around the edges and raw and very authentic. Presumably that was very much what you were going for, rather than a sort of a polished, highly choreographed look.
No, it's not Busby Berkeley, is it really? Yes. I mean, there's no patterns of dancing from above. No, it's ordinary people just enjoying. I mean, it's not about the accuracy of the steps. It's about their enjoyment and the elation and the in being invigorated and really loving life. And Jimmy himself, tries a step or two, and he dances like a working man, but he gets the basics. And he obviously danced in New York, so why shouldn't he dance back in Ireland?
And just finally, Ken, I was interested to read that you'd said that most films either, reinforce the status quo, or they're just an escape valve. And I just wondered what keeps you passionate about making films.
Well, I think they were talking about the commercial cinema there, and I mean most big commercial films, because they're made by big capitalist enterprises. They're made by big corporations, and the struggle we've got now is against corporate power. So the big corporations, of course, will reinforce the status quo. And if you deconstruct the films, you see that their elevation of the idea of wealth, their presentation of the United States as the centre of democracy, the defenders of freedom and peace. This is quite false, really. This is not true. It's either that or it's monsters and the rest, and which is just ignore what's happening in the world, just enter a fantasy land. But film can do so much more. I mean, film is the most extraordinary medium because it combines drama and visual arts and so much, and it can be as broad as a library. And it isn't, sadly, but it could be. So that's what keeps you going. I mean, it's working. It's an amazing medium that can record and illustrate and explore and elucidate, clarify and so on.
Ken, Loach, Paul, Laverty, we're lucky to have filmmakers like yourselves. Thank you very much.
A lot.